Thank you for joining us. You are a part of an elite group who recognizes that Black women's health should be at the forefront of the national conversation. We are mothers, daughters, activists, entrepreneurs, entertainers, corporate warriors, and more, who help boost the economy and often drive the national conversation. For 38 years, the Black Women's Health Imperative has strived to amplify our voices, help enact policy that protects us, research our issues, create programs that enhance our lives, and produce events like this one to ensure we keep the conversation going about the issues that matter to us most. So, let's get started with our program.
Good evening. I'm Linda Goler-Blount, President and CEO of the Black Women's Health Imperative. Thank you for joining us for our series on cultural conversations. Tonight, we're going to focus on healthcare, humanity, and voting. We are just a mere 5 days away from what historians will say is the most consequential election in modern history, an election which could literally determine the future of our democracy for the next generation. 2020 has definitely been a year, and it's not over. The toll COVID-19 has taken on our lives, the healthcare system, and our economy are unlike anything we've ever experienced. Many of us, frontline health workers, those of us who must leave our homes every day to go to work, those of us who have no paid work to go to, are all experiencing stress and mental health issues at alarming levels. And what about the children? The failure of national leadership to mount even the most basic, most common sense response to this pandemic has led, by some estimates, to an unconscionable 50,000 needless deaths. We're worse off now than we were 6 months ago. And given the recent surge in COVID-19 cases, there's just no end in sight. Our humanity has been laid bare with the graphic and horrific murders of George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor. That's just to name a few. There are so many more. And what we've witnessed has been heart-wrenching. The anger is real. The protests are inspiring. But what they do is they highlight the need to vote at the local, state, and national levels. And it's more important now than ever. Black women have been here before. We live at the intersection of racial and gender oppression and economic insult. Our rights and our safety, even our lives, are devalued and threatened in the workplace, hospital, classroom, even in our own apartments. Black women have historically stood at the forefront of social movements, advocating for ourselves and our communities. To quote a brilliant friend and journalist, Mary C. Curtis, we know that as Black women, if we say something, there may be consequences, but to say nothing is to be inconsequential. We need systemic change. The time is now, and this year, this election, we will not be inconsequential. In response, the Black Women's Health Imperative has released a new Black Women Vote, a national health policy agenda. This is an update of our 2018 agenda, which included 4 pillars: access to quality, affordable health care, equitable responses to public health emergencies, certainly need that, sufficient diversity in clinical research, and increased funding to support HBCUs. We've updated the 2020 edition to include a 5th pillar, social justice, which addresses the issues of police violence, sexual assault, and incarceration. Under each pillar, the 2020 policy agenda includes a thorough list of the most pressing health issues Black women face today, with concrete policy recommendations to help move this country toward equity. This agenda serves to inform and mobilize. With it, BWHI aims to empower Black women with a blueprint for change and to deliver a call to action for policymakers, practitioners, academics, and community leaders. Change comes when we know the issues, when we know where candidates stand, and when we vote. And if you haven't voted already, vote. Vote like your health depends on it, because it does. It's against this backdrop that we're so fortunate to have a conversation among some of today's most impressive leaders and thinkers in the national movement for voting rights, health equity, and social justice. So to moderate this conversation, I am so pleased to be able to introduce Ebony K. Williams. Ebony co-hosts the hip hop show State of the Culture, which airs on Revolt TV, a powerful media voice in the national conversation where politics, law, justice, sports, and culture intersect. Ebony is an attorney, best-selling author, and television personality who's been featured everywhere: Fox Sports, CBS News, Headline News, CNN, the NFL Network, and dozens of other outlets. Welcome, Ebony. How are you?
Linda, thank you so much, my dear. That was a beautiful introduction, and most importantly, beautiful words speaking to this moment, to the critical nature of this election and the power of Black womanhood. Thank you, Linda.
Absolutely. So in 2008, the election was historic for what it meant for progress, for hope, for humanity. Remember that?
I do.
And here we are in 2020, where humanity, justice, science are on the ballot. So as I turn this conversation over to you, start us off with, what concerns you most?
I got to start with the Supreme Court, Linda. I got to start with the fact that just as of 48 hours ago, we sit with a brand new Supreme Court, one that is now with a 6-3 conservative majority. And I'm not a partisan person, but it's beyond partisanship at this point, right? What I know that this 6-3 conservative leaning court represents everything that touches our way of life as Black Americans is on the ballot, from reproductive health to affirmative action. I want to say maternal mortality. That's what I was searching for there. If you care about the environment, climate change, if you care about the rights of the LGBTQ community, it's all on the ballot. And the fact that this election will likely be close, and this election will likely fall in the hands of this new 6-3 Supreme Court, it's terrifying. And the only way to make sure it doesn't become a 7-2 conservative leaning Supreme Court is to vote in this election, because indeed, if this current administration is not voted out on November 3rd, it will mean havoc for Black women and our children and our families for generations to come. So helping me join this conversation and leading us into exactly what this means for Black women and Black women's health in this country, I'm going to start with a one-on-one conversation with a phenomenal leader. This woman is of dynamic character and leadership. Her name is Tamika Mallory. We all know her and revere her. Tamika is the co-founder of Until Freedom. Tamika, welcome to this evening's conversation.
Right. Thank you so much for having me. You would think that after all the Zooms, we would, at this point, I'm not sure if the mic is the camera is the mic, but I'm happy to be with you. And Ebony, you are just so incredible, so amazing. And I'm also very, very thankful to be with the Black Women's Health Initiative tonight. When I found out about this event, I'm actually sitting at a bar that is not open in Raleigh, North Carolina. I wish it was, but it is not. I just come in from knocking on hundreds of doors in North Carolina, along with my dear sister, Angela Rye, also Rhapsody, the artist, was out with us, and a number of other individuals. And some of us, not Rhapsody and Angela, but the rest of us have been on a tour through battleground states, all the way from Florida to Alabama to Georgia. Now, as I said, in North Carolina, headed to Pennsylvania. We're going straight into the belly by going into Philly, where we know, trying to go there and talk to people about voting is difficult, because we saw that Mr. Wallace was killed in Philly by police officers who shot him to death. He was a mentally challenged person, and he was shot to death in front of his mother and his family and an entire community of traumatized individuals. And so what we are seeing there is unrest, civil unrest, and instigation from law enforcement that makes for a toxic combination. And we were already scheduled to go to Pennsylvania and to go into Philly and also Pittsburgh. But now that we are going there during this state of emergency GOTV tour, Get Out the Vote tour, it has become even more important for us to help people understand that their protest in the streets has to be directly connected to them going to the ballot and going to the voting polls to ensure that protest and policy walk together, that they are aligned, and we always understand that it is unfinished business to do one without the other, or to do the protest component and then to say that the policy piece doesn't matter. And of course, to be a policy maker or someone who believes that policy can make change and to not respect the work of those who are protesting on the ground. That all of these things have to happen in tangent. They have to be together, and all sides of this fight, whether it be our artists, whether it be our entertainers, whether it be those people, again, who are on the ground every single day, the lawyers, everybody has to be working together. And so, as I said, I just came in tired from knocking on doors all day long. In our work and Until Freedom, we're on a tour with another group called Woke Vote. Our sister, Duana Thompson, is the leader of our efforts. Her and her team, they've been organizing and coordinating everything that we've been doing. And we went to a community yesterday. And the community, to me, many of them had signs out talking about voting. They had signs that said, "We believe in science. Black women are king." I saw signs that said, "Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere." So I already knew when I walked into that community that those individuals were already voting. They were turning out. They were going to the polls. They messaging in their lawns, on their lawns and in their yards was very clear. And so I said, "Hey guys, I know we had to come here today. There was a program. It was important for us to be there." We also met Pastor McBride, Michael McBride from California. And so we had a program throughout the day. But I said, tomorrow when we go out, let's make sure that we go to the areas where they claim those individuals are low propensity voters, people who don't generally turn out in large numbers for elections. And so we spent the entire day today working in housing projects, in North Carolina. And what I can tell you is that a number of individuals said, "Hey, no one's ever knocked on my door, but I haven't registered to vote. So if you register me, I will go." And we had vans to take them to vote after they got registered. We did that with a number of individuals, and most people in that community, again, said that they had never had anyone to knock on their doors. But what we have helped them, and of course, we run into people who are apathetic. They don't necessarily feel like they should be engaged. But what we say to them is that the health challenges that your community is facing, the asthma that is happening because of the plants that have been positioned in your communities, the food that you don't have, the clean food and accessible vegetables and fruits and all of those things. Those things are controlled, not necessarily by the presidential election. Clearly that is important, and we've encouraged everyone to make sure that they vote for the president, whoever they want to see as president. Of course, it's nonpartisan, so we're not telling people who to vote for, but we have absolutely made sure that to tell them it's important to participate in the presidential election. However, if you decide that because I don't like the candidates, I'm not interested, I'm going to vote down the ballot. Well, I'm going to not vote at all. I'm not going to show up at all. What we've been saying to them is that you're cutting off your nose to spite your face, like Big Mama used to tell us, because there are people down the ballot. When I voted in New York, I voted for 3 judges, an assembly member, and a state senator. Those elections are more important in terms of the proper health care, the proper housing, and all the other things that our communities deserve and need. And so you can't not show up at the polls, because if you don't show up, you're missing an opportunity to actually take care of the health and wealth of your own community.
I just want to say for record, I thoroughly enjoy interviewing you, Tamika. I don't even have to ask no questions.
I'm
Just
sorry.
wind you up. No, I'm very serious. Wind you up and you go. A few things you said, sister, that are important. I just want to highlight. You know, I'm from North Carolina, so you are in my backyard, and people don't even realize it, Tamika. So goes North Carolina, politically speaking, electoral vote speaking. Really, so goes the election in many
Yes,
ways.
absolutely.
Right, you know this. So the work that you and Until Freedom and your sister organization you're working with are doing right there in Raleigh, Durham, and Greensboro, and Charlotte, and also some of those redder counties surrounding, it's critical. It is the difference maker, for sure. And what you said about the concert that needs to happen between the protesting, right, the visibility of the politics of protesting, which is critical. And I know you are on literally the front lines of this. And a lot of people are just not being familiar with your work, Tamika, because you've had so many fantastic viral moments over the summer and then some, but you are not new to this, okay? Your family is not new to this. I want to be clear about that. You come from a long line, a legacy of activists that do this work, that live this work, that breathe this work. Sister, tell us a bit about how that upbringing, witnessing that legacy and now living this legacy in your own life, how it has shaped your view as to the importance of the Black vote.
Yeah. So first of all, let's be very clear. I was not always one who accepted the calling, if you will. I ran away from home. I got involved in the streets. I did a lot of things because I was anti what my parents were trying to show me and the direction that they were leading me in. But my parents are great leaders. They are background leaders. They're not as their daughter. You know, when I was young in school, I ran my mouth a lot, and I still do. But I've learned.
Thank God you do. Thank God you do.
Thank God now, but I can tell you that my parents, they didn't love it. And my mom used to say that mouth of yours is going to get you in trouble. But I lived to see the day when she said it's good trouble. Very similar to Congressman John Lewis. I've been in good trouble because of my words, because of my what I hope is a courageousness that I haven't found on my own. God has literally placed it in, and really has led me to where it is that I sit today. And so my parents and the work that they've done, the fact that my granddaddy, Step Mallory, helped to organize the first union in a plant that he worked in here in North Carolina.
There you go.
The fact that, my family it's a group of individuals who give back. That's just what we were taught. And so I always say to people who are trying to figure out what can I do, start in your own house. Start with your own children. When we're talking about this election cycle, one of the things that we did, we gave the kids chips and stuff and made them feel excited. And then we took them around and they knocked on the doors. They put some of the flyers on the cars because they were excited and they knew that they were a part of the process. So you make sure that as you are going to vote, as you are considering candidates, as you're watching the news, to sit your own children down, the same way my mother did me. If you want to know why am I in this place, it's because either my mother or dad, depending on who came home at what time on election day, we didn't have early voting. So now people have that, but they took us to the polls. They took us inside of the little booth that we used to have back in the days, and they pulled the curtain back and pulled the levers, and they actually allowed us to participate by having us to be there with them. And so it makes it a little bit easier to get people involved in the process when they learn it from very, very young. And the last thing I would say is that people need to understand that there is an effort, an actual coordinated attempt to keep us from showing up at the polls. That people, we went to in Montgomery, the Legacy Museum, where we learned, or rather observed, exhibits that showed everything from enslavement to mass incarceration. And then we went to Bryan Stevenson's lynching museum, where we learned about all those people. And there are many that are not named because they only list what they can prove. And we saw many of the documents to show people who had been killed just because they registered people to vote. And we know that voter registration voter suppression is still in progress. If they did not believe that our vote was powerful, they wouldn't try to stop us from using it. So take your children and your family. Let's educate one another. As my friend, attorney Lanita Baker, the attorney for Breonna Taylor's family, would say, we don't need to just like voting, to just like the political process. We need to love it the same way that we do everything else about our culture.
Indeed. And we're going to join Tamika with 2 additional powerhouse voices. But what you just said, I want to just highlight. We got to love it because it is so directly correlated to if you don't like the fact that Breonna Taylor was shot and killed in her own home, if you don't like the fact that George Floyd was killed before our very eyes by law enforcement kneeling on his neck and literally snuffing the life out of his brother, the protesting is critically important. But how do you change the laws that allow for these officers to never be accountable, right? That is about policy change. How do you change the policy? You must vote on the lawmakers, the policy makers. So I think that what you said is so important to me. I want people to get it. It's not a gap between stopping and eradicating the killing of Black people in this country and voting. Voting is not a passive act. And I think for too long it's been viewed that way. Don't you know what I mean? It is a radical act. It is a radical act of activism, and I applaud you and Until Freedom and everyone you're working with on the ground, doing the work, the retail politics of changing the policy to help put life into our existence in this country. Okay, so joining us now is going to be Candace Parker, an incredible sister. I am a huge fan of the WNBA. I'm a huge fan of what the WNBA has done in this moment, which I know we're going to speak to. Candace, of course, is a professional basketball player for the Los Angeles Sparks of the WNBA. Also joining us is Curtis Granderson. Curtis is hey Curtis, how you doing, bro? He's a former Major League Baseball outfielder, and he's also the president of the Players Alliance. Thank you to you both. Candace, I want to start with you. As I just said, I think the WNBA has been the model, no offense, Curtis, the model for what athletes and activism can look like in this moment. Candace, can you just take us through what I know the WNBA dedicated their whole season to Sister Breonna Taylor? Take us through what those conversations were like and how the decision was made.
Well, this was an interesting year, just in terms of being in professional sports and deciding whether we were going to have a season one, not being able to host it in arenas and things like that. And so I think collectively, we as WNBA players came together and we're like, if we are going to play this summer, it's going to be for a purpose. And it's going to bring awareness to the fact that Black women are murdered by police and people don't care. And with that being said, we wore and we dedicated the season to #SayHerName. And we wore Breonna Taylor's name on the back of our jersey. But when we did that, it represented so many more names. It wasn't just Breonna Taylor and her family. And there's countless number of Zoom sessions that we've had with her family and her parents and things like that. And we just really wanted to utilize our platform because the WNBA, we are women. We are the longest standing sports league in the United States, that women's sports league. And then also just we're 80% African-American. We are part of the LGBTQ community, different socioeconomic backgrounds, different religions. Like, we are a league that is made up of the majority of the minority of this country. If we didn't use our voice, we would be doing a disservice to where we came from.
Indeed. Curtis, I want to ask you the fact that you have been a star in the Major League Baseball league. And of course, we know Jackie Robinson broke that color barrier so long ago. But today, the league remains majority white, and we don't see the representation of our brothers like we need to. And I know that's a big part of the reason that you founded your alliance about this. Tell us about that and the work that you're doing to make sure that Major League Baseball better reflects our people.
Well, thank you very much for having me out here, and very excited to be a part of the Black Women's Health Initiative. Truly honored and privileged to be the one male on here with such a great cast of Black women just speaking and showing their voices so everybody can hear. So thank you very much for that. And you're right, Jackie Robinson broke the color barrier back in 1947. So it's amazing to see what he started, where we got to, where at some point in time around the 70s or 80s, we were at about 18 to 20% African-American players in Major League Baseball. And this year, 2020, we were only at 8%, a draft contract from what Candace talked about in the WNBA. They're at 80%. We are at 8%. So when we started talking about different things over the course of this year, how to go out there and show that we want our voices heard, how to represent keep in mind, we were also battling the fact that 2 teams started opening day this year with 0 Black players on their team in 2020. Our World Series this year that just finished 2 days ago had 1 Black player between the 2 teams. So there is an uphill battle that we are constantly still trying to battle. And with the Players Alliance, which is comprised of 150 current and former Major League Baseball players, our goal and mission is to make it inclusive both on the field and off the field. And that includes the places that we live and call home. And we are doing things well before we established the Alliance, from trying to be in the community, being visible. We understand that when people see people that look like them, you go, I want to be like that. As a basketball player, Candace, you can attest to this. We saw Michael Jordan. We wanted to be like Mike. You know, that was part of what you see. And we want to make sure that that is visible in the baseball space and just in the public space in general. The fact that a player like Mookie Betts, who just won his 2nd World Series, is also an MVP. And you can realize, wow, he's not the tallest. He's not the biggest. He's not the strongest. But he looks like me. He talks like me. His name is similar to me. I want to do the things that he's talking about. And that's what we're trying our best to do with the Players Alliance.
Curtis, I want to ask you, the fact that Black representation in Major League Baseball right now is so relatively low, 8%, when we make up 12% of the U.S. populace. Does that make it more difficult to speak out about the issues of racism and social injustice in the country? Is there, what are the locker room talks like when you guys are represented in smaller numbers than you should be?
It makes it a challenge for sure. I retired this year, January 31st, which is actually Jackie Robinson's birthday. So we chimed that up perfectly. Again, Jackie is the reason why I got a chance to do this. And when I was going to step away from the game, I chose that date purposely for that. But I remember those conversations, and this, again, not very long ago, 2019, and even conversations I've had with players that are playing right now today. The difficult challenge that we run into is the fact that we are the minority. When we mention stories or talk about, hey, did you see what happened on the news? A lot of the responses are, well, that doesn't happen to you. He's different. She's different. You're not like them. You know, you're way better than that. And I go, but this happened, and they don't believe it. So we're trying to convince them that these stories are not just one-off, that these things are constantly happening in our communities, in our families' communities. And what you see on TV is just a small snippet of it. So it makes it very difficult to be able to go out there and do it, but we are definitely trying to do our best to try to increase the numbers, and it's moving in the right direction. It's going to take some time, but most recently, Major League Baseball took a big step in the right direction by hiring Michelle Meyership, Black African-American woman who is now the head of the Chief People and Culture for Major League Baseball. She is basically right underneath the commissioner, and she is on there taking names and doing everything she can to try to make things more and more inclusive to help with all those challenges you just talked about.
That's important. And I knew Corey Smith quite well as well, who previously worked in that diversity space with MLB. And I'm so glad to see that sister also continuing and probably elevating that work. And Corey knows I said that, so we cool. So I want to ask you this, Candace, because I think Curtis touched on something important, which is that when mass society kind of sees Black athletes or Black celebrities or who they consider to be the Black elite, right, using their platforms that frankly y'all have earned, very hard earned platforms to speak to these issues and bring light and put things on the back of your jerseys or what have you. There is this narrative of y'all should be the least to complain, the last to complain. Y'all have money, y'all have privilege. What are you mad about? You're a rich Black person. And they don't want to hear it from you. What's your reaction to that, Candace?
It's interesting to see the transformation that has really occurred within even the last 3 or 4 years. Like I stop and kind of think, just from an athlete's point of view, that back in 2017 with Kaepernick, with Colin Kaepernick and the kneeling, if you would have told me 3 years later that people would be criticized that didn't kneel, I would say you were crazy. Just because at the time, it goes to say that sometimes the things you're going to use your platform for aren't going to be popular at the time. And it doesn't necessarily mean it's not right. And I think as athletes, we're starting to see that. And I have so much hope for this future generation, in that this generation, and I say LeBron James honestly has done a lot for just athlete empowerment, speaking up for what's right. And, you know, the debate between LeBron and Michael Jordan and who's like the bigger impact in terms of from a society standpoint has been LeBron, because he has utilized He's empowered athletes. And, you know, I say that proud as an athlete that is able to go out and fight for the inequalities. Like I said, the WNBA, we take it very seriously. And, you know, it's so important for athletes to do that. Think about it. A generation ago, it was, you think about the three athletes that met at the summit. You think about Bill Russell. You think about Muhammad Ali at the time. And now he's considered a hero for what he gave up, the peak during his career. And now we have entire leagues that stopped playing within the bubble and joined in solidarity with the Milwaukee Bucks. You know, so I think that there is a time now, and the time is now, that athletes are realizing that we have a voice, we have to utilize that, and we have to help the people from the places we came from.
Indeed. Sister Mallory has to run and go continue her work of this election of a lifetime. Tamika, before you leave us, sis, I just want to give you an opportunity to have some closing remarks.
Well, I just want to say thank you. First of all, I think this is a critical conversation. I'm definitely grateful for an opportunity to participate in an intersectional dialogue. You know, I obviously am very much engaged in the criminal justice, and I don't say reform anymore. I say overhaul, because that's need in the system. But it is great to be here with the Black Women's Health Initiative, because we already know that if we are not healthy mentally and physically, it's impossible for us to be good participants from a political standpoint or otherwise. And as we've been out in communities across this country, I just want to say to all those who are organizers and celebrities and those of us who live really privileged lives, that we may be making plans on behalf of community, but what we have found is that when you actually go to the people, you work with them and you talk with them, you will learn exactly what they need, and they actually will help you to organize with them on their behalf. And so I am extremely grateful that we're spending time going across this country, going into the places that most people don't want to touch, learning from the children, learning from the parents, learning from the community, because I think that as we center the most marginalized voices within our communities, we will actually be able to make change. And so I'm grateful again for the opportunity to participate. You all look incredible. You speak incredibly well. And the work that you're doing, most importantly, is powerful on behalf of changing this world, not just for ourselves, because most of us, we've made it to wherever it is we're going, and God has blessed us and we'll be able to go higher. But the kid that today got some chips from us off the bus and said, I finally got something to eat. That kid, him and his parents, they're the ones that actually need our support. So let's go lower, let's go deeper. And Reverend Jesse Jackson said once to me, I was talking one day and I kept saying, you know, our people at the bottom, we have to lift them up. And he asked me, when you talk about the bottom, what else do you think about when you say bottom? Like, give me another word. And I couldn't come up with one. And he said, it's not the bottom, it's the foundation. That our people are at the foundation of this nation. If we lift them, we can lift the entire world. Everybody is hanging on the backs of Black people, and especially Black women. And so that's the work that we have to do in this moment, is to go to the foundation and lift from there so that we can all see the change that we want in this nation. Thank you so much. Thank you for having me, and love to you all. Ebony, love you so much.
Thank you, Tamika. Applaud you, sister. Stay safe and stay well. We love you. Thank you, Tamika. Curtis, I wanna ask you, as the esteemed only gentleman joining us tonight on this Black Women's Health Imperative panel, what do you think the role of Black men is in this moment to supporting their sisters from a mentally healthy place to a physically healthy place and an emotionally healthy place?
It's huge, and you see it especially on the sports side. Anytime you see a Black athlete get a chance to speak and thank somebody, the first person they thank outside of God is their mom. You know, so we understand the importance of Black women in our lives. And especially for me, my mother and sister are from Mississippi, an area that has been one of the most impoverished, one of the most obese areas in the country. But the things that I've seen them go through and build to create for me and the people around them has been absolutely amazing. My sister is an HBCU grad and also teaches at that HBCU, her alum, Jackson State University. My mom is an HBCU grad. She went to Mississippi Valley State University, and she became a Chicago public school teacher. So seeing the two of them go out there and realize that they can have such an impact in two different areas, one as a mother and as a family member, but in the second, probably most important place is that's in the school, especially being a Black face in the school, teaching and developing and molding. We have to help motivate that. We have to push that. We have to encourage that. We have to highlight that. And as a Black man, that's our job to be able to do that. These people got us to where we are today. We are not here as a Black man if it wasn't for a Black woman. So I thank my mom and sister every day. I thank you and all the people in the audience that are watching this, because without all of you, there is no me. There is no Jackie Robinson. There is no LeBron James or Michael Jordan like Candace was talking about. So thank you for that. And it's very, very important for us to just listen first. That's the big thing. Listen. We want to talk. I want to tell you everything that's going on. You do this and you do that. I need to listen to what you want and listen to what you need. That's how I can best help you.
That's beautiful. Thank you for that, brother. To that point, you mentioned our fantastic audience. Y'all, we're going to conclude this dynamic, powerful conversation with questions. This is not a lecture. This is an exchange. This is a dialogue. So audience member, please pop into the chat with your questions for these esteemed panelists. And we want to make sure that your voices are heard. We want to listen, as Curtis just said. Candace, I want to ask you as a professional, as a woman who is such a role model to so many young girls of all colors, but of course, specifically young Black girls. What would you say, Candace, is like the biggest, and I know it's a lot of issues that Black women are facing and challenged with, but what would you say if you had to name two that you think Black women as a collective really need to focus on in terms of taking care of ourselves and our health?
Well, you said two.
I know it's a lot. But
quite a list. Obviously healthcare is huge. Reproductive rights, income inequalities. As a woman, as an African American woman, to sit in this country in 2020 and to have to explain to my daughter that a woman can do the same job as a man and get paid less for the same job. This country has continually systematically suppressed Black women. And if you look at just through COVID alone, Black women are the highest among the unemployed at this point in time. Black women are killed at a higher rate than any other group of women. And with that being said, this election is so crucial. And, we're going to turn out, we're going to mobilize, we're going to get our communities. We're most often the head of the household in a number of homes. And so we are the ones that mobilize the right to vote. We are the ones that go get the vans and make sure that the uncles and the cousins and everybody's voting. And so I think it's so important when you are going to the polls to think about Black women as well.
Yeah. And, nobody asked me, Candace, but I'm going to tell you what I think my top one is, child. And that is, you are a mother. I have yet to join that esteemed sorority yet, but I aspire to. And I'm not younger. I'm getting older. I'm 37. And as I very seriously, contemplate motherhood, I want to tell y'all that I have a lot of fear and anxiety around living to tell about it, because the reality is, and I'm very serious, and I sit as a woman of great privilege. I have a healthcare plan. I have good income. I have a strong support system. And yet I'm still very terrified of what the maternal mortality looks like for Black women in this country. Because when Serena Williams almost dies in childbirth, when Beyonce Knowles Carter struggles in childbirth, I know that it's not a class thing. It's not a money thing. It's a Black woman thing. And the fact that Black women are almost 5 times more likely to die in childbirth in this country than our white counterparts, it's just not lost on me. So that really rings true to me, y'all. And it's something that as Black women and a Black collective, including our Black men, I did an interview on Revolt Black News, and I'm heartbroken because his brother's first name escapes me, but I know his wife's name was Kira, and it's Kira for Moms is his foundation. He lost his wife in childbirth, and he's now left to raise their 2 sons alone. And to your point, Curtis, just how this brother is showing up for Black women all across this country is powerful. Charles Johnson, that is his name. Thank you, Ms. Linda. Charles Johnson is doing incredible work in supporting Black women as best as they can. Okay, I now want to bring in two other dynamic queens to our conversation. I want to make sure I get their titles fully correct here. Give me just 1 second. I know one of them well because we go way back into the industry, and that is Yodit Twalde. Yodit, in addition, there she is. Hi, Yodit. Hi. She's a renowned attorney. She's a legal analyst on television and broadcast. She's also senior legal counsel at Grassroots Law Project. Welcome, Yodit.
Thank you, Ebony.
Of course. And joining Yodit here is Wakinya Clanton. And yes, Wakinya. Say it for me one more time, baby.
Wakinya, you said it correctly.
I was right. Wakinya. I was like, sometimes
just think Wakanda and you'll get it. Just think Wakanda.
I was like, well, I want to say Wakanda. You know that's what I want to say.
Wakinya, yeah.
It's Wakinya. Okay. Sorry, Wakinya. Wakinya is a senior advisor to the chairman of the Democratic National Committee, of course, that being Tom Perez. Thank you so much, Queens, for joining. Yodit, I want to start with you. We're having a conversation about Black women's health in general, but I want you to speak to the legalities when it comes to the intersection of the law and Black women and our well-being in this country. What sticks out to you as important things to focus on?
Oh my God. There's just so many, but right now what sticks out for me is, Amy Coney Barrett. I'm gonna call her ACB. Her confirmation to the Supreme Court. This is a woman who has contributed opinions in the past that would indicate that she wanted to reduce access to abortions. She's criticized the Supreme Court for upholding the Affordable Care Act. This is a woman who couldn't even answer during her confirmation hearing whether she agreed with the late Justice Scalia on whether the Voting Rights Act was a racial entitlement. And then guess what cases are actually going to be coming before the Supreme Court? The ACA, abortion rights, and voting rights. So that is what scares me now as far as the issues that we've all just been discussing. Healthcare, you've got, things that are just definitely going to have detrimental ramifications for people of color and low-income communities, women, the LGBT community. And that to me is what is concerning. And we can't do anything about her confirmation. She's in there. It's a 6-3 conservative majority. But what we can do is prevent it from leaning even more right. And that's taking back the presidency and flipping the Senate. So that is what is sticking out in the forefront of my mind.
Well, that's a complete word. To that point, really, truly, I don't even think, Yodit, a lot of people get it. I don't think people really understand the stakes of this high court, and it's fundamental. Let me ask you this, Wakinya, your work with the DNC is fundamental. And I want to know the conversations the party is having around the safety procuring voter turnout in record numbers. We know that's what this election is going to turn on. We say that about every election, but we know that's for real true on this election. The good news, I interpret it as good news, is we're already seeing record turnout in early voting. What recommendations do you have to our audience, Wakinya, in terms of how to be safe and diligent, and if they can vote in person, to make sure that, as Yodit just gave a mandate to, we don't get this court looking 7-2 anytime soon, conservative leaning?
Ebony, thank you so much for the question. And listen, at the DNC, we've realized since 2016 that the work around voter suppression needed to be early, it needed to be intentional, and it needed to weigh all options. So in addition to making sure that, one, none of us could have predicted that we would be voting in this type of climate, right? But I think in realizing that we did adjust the way that we were talking to people about participating in the voting process, we really stress and continue to stress following the CDC guidelines. Please wear your mask. Please maintain your social safety distance. Come prepared, honestly, to wait. Come prepared to wait. Really look at Election Day, look at November 3rd as a full day of work, because that's exactly what it is. We've been wrapping up our work around security protocols, trying to battle misinformation in every way that that is imaginable. We came up with the entire disinformation kit that was tailored towards the general public, that was tailored towards campaigns, elected officials, sister committees, so forth and so on. We've been working really closely with the private sector on making sure that all these tech companies are also monitoring what's happening across their platforms, and we have an open line of communication on that. We've been working really closely with Homeland Security and the FBI and others to ensure that we have a rapid response chain in place. And then in the event that we do incur some suspicious activity, which, you know, we've already seen in some cases come to fruition. In terms of people's personal safety, we've really been arming and recruiting volunteers around the clock to really help monitor what's going on there. We have a very active and involved voter protection hotline. We've been recruiting lawyers for over a year, really building up our legal defenses on that side. And so we are preparing. Thank you so much for your service.
Yeah, we ready to rock and roll, right? You ain't got to tell us but one time. Come on now.
Listen, I mean, we're doing all we can, but most importantly, we are informing and empowering and equipping the voter, right? What we've seen, and we all can, we've all kind of gleaned some semblance of hope around the fact that we have more than 60 million Americans who already cast their vote in this election. We've already surpassed 2016 complete turnout numbers in so many places. And we're seeing people really maintain where it counts. You know, our people are an inventive people. You know, we're an innovative people. You see people doing party at the polls. We done turned the whole poll line into a cubic shuffle line. You know, we're doing all that we can. And to me, that's encouraging. You know, doing this work around the clock 365 can be exhausting, but most importantly, it's necessary. And so with that, I get my second win.
Listen, ain't nobody gonna ever beat Black people. That's just facts. It's just the truth. I try to like look for other alternatives. We just always gonna do that. Dee, I introduced you as senior counsel, of course, for Grassroots Law Project, and I know you wear a lot of hats, and you're very busy in the community, both from a media standpoint. I think you've been, anybody that follows you on social, I know I've seen it. You've been doing great breakdowns of what these headlines mean, what a grand jury is, what an indictment looks like, why perhaps the burden of proof might not have been met. Talk a bit about why that work is important, because I feel like there's a lot of armchair analysts and lawyers, and they all mean well. And this is really, I promise, it's not shade. People really mean well, because it's a lot of emotion, you know, when we see our brothers and sisters killed in the streets and we see no accountability. Talk about, Dee, why you use the platforms that you have acquired to make this plain for the everyday citizen.
You know, it's important because I actually see it on a day-to-day. You know, I practice law, so I see a lot of the things that people complain about and don't understand why. And it's really just from a lack of understanding how the process works. And so, you know, with the Grassroots Law Project, for example, you know, we are dedicated to a pilot program that we're starting in 3 major cities: San Francisco, Boston, and Philadelphia. And we've teamed up with progressive DAs who are open to implementing policies that, one, is going to create better transparency and trust with the communities they serve, but also address a lot of the hurt in the community from prosecutorial misconduct. So it's uncovering that and also addressing it. And people just don't understand how prosecutions work, how DAs work, how charges are filed, and so right now, as unfortunate as it is with, you know, the Ahmaud Arbery's and George Floyd's and Breonna Taylor, these are teaching moments right now, especially when the community can't understand, and they're grappling with the fact that someone who was asleep in their bed and was non-threatening in her own home could be shot dead, and not one person can be held responsible criminally for that. And that's what made me want to explain how a grand jury works and why it's important to serve as a juror, you know, because I don't know how many times I've gotten calls from friends, family members who will say, hey, you know, Can you tell me how we can get out of jury duty? And it infuriates me because
Yo, D,
Yes.
I'll do you one better, child. How about I had a fellow attorney say he was not going to vote because that's how you get called for jury duty, right? They in many jurisdictions, at least, they decide who they're going to put in the jury pool potentially off of voter registration records. And so this is an important message for our people, what you're saying right now, Yo D. We can't be mad when
Exactly.
Ahmaud Arbery's killers walk free. We can't be mad when the killers of Trayvon Martin walk free. We cannot be mad, y'all, when Derek Chauvin is potentially walking free, when we don't avail ourselves to the opportunity to participate in their accountability.
And
Didn't mean to interrupt you, sis. Go ahead.
No, and somehow people miss the connection. And so it's up to us to connect the dots. But thank God, again, I've got to use the example of Breonna Taylor, these two brave grand jurors who didn't have to come forward, right? They get to enjoy the privilege of being anonymous, but they came forward, thank God, to explain to the community, the public, Breonna Taylor's family, to tell us what actually happened behind these closed door proceedings. So imagine if we weren't on these juries,
right,
we wouldn't know a whole lot. And this is about us really getting involved in a system that, yes, needs overhauling, but this is a system that we have. And so we need to get involved as much as possible. And so it's just really important to educate people on the criminal legal system. I can't even say justice, but to educate them on that, and to also reinforce our duty in the role that we play if we really want to see results in our community. So.
Indeed. Kenya, I have another question for you in your work within the DNC. I do want to call upon our esteemed audience one more time. We are going to open this floor up to your questions, your concerns, what you want to ask of this esteemed panel, what you want to know, and your reflection. So please drop those in the comment box, and we were going to get to you very shortly. Kenya, dear, I want to talk about the fact that you have worked with some of the most high-profile elected officials in our country. I want to know, what are the conversations like amongst the politicians themselves and their senior staff when they talk about the disparities for Black women's health in this country? What are the solutions that are at least put on the table? What are the thought processes around how to make Black women healthier and safer in this country?
Well, I would say, Ebony, and thank you again for that question. You know, none of our officials deny the necessity that exists around Black women's health. You've seen it in the works that are being put forth by our legislators, like Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley and Congresswoman Lauren Underwood, who are both new to the United States Congress, but yet they have been putting forth some record and groundbreaking legislation, and also creating caucuses that are specifically tailored to our health, right? Congresswoman Underwood, in particular, banded together with a couple of folks in the House of Representatives to create the Black Women's Caucus on Maternal Health, and really centering that issue, that epidemic that exists for Black women. And I think you see it time and time again. If we look at the Affordable Care Act, you know, that major landmark piece of legislation had more provisions in it for Black women than any other piece of legislation that we've seen in our history. And so as we think about what's going on with the Supreme Court, and we think about how extremely dangerous this administration is, and also things that they are institutionalizing around people's civility and humanity, you know, the existence of communities, you know, I think it goes without saying, it has always been a priority for our leaders. The problem comes in when you have people who only operate in their own self-interest, who come back and want to roll back pieces of legislation and pieces of policy that have taken us literally decades to get cemented into this country. And so, you know, and even if you look at the COVID cases, right, and this year alone, majority of the pieces of legislation that came out, from the CARES Act to the HEROES Act, really focused on creating equitable healthcare opportunities for Black people, for our community. And so it's still, it has been a priority, it remains one, and it will continue. I think it will remain one until we don't have to have these conversations around equitable healthcare coverage in this country.
Fantastic. I have a question now from our audience, and this is going to be for Curtis and for Candace. We see sports leagues around our country, specifically in this case, the NFL, supporting women through campaigns like the breast cancer awareness program, wearing pink on their cleats and whatnot. But we know that for Black women, we die more than our white counterparts and any other racial group of breast cancer. We are diagnosed less, but we die more. We know this about breast cancer. Do y'all see the male sports leagues being able to more specifically speak to how breast cancer and other health disparities target Black women? Do you think there's space? Can the NFL, let me say it a little more plain. Candace, you said earlier that if someone would have told you in 2017 that the turnaround as to how we look at kneeling and just articulating the wrongdoings and the injustices against Black Americans would look like it looks today versus how we treat, not we, but the country treated Colin Kaepernick, you wouldn't believe it. So are we that far off from an October that says, yes, breast cancer is terrible for all women, but the NFL saying because we are a 70% Black league, we're going to take special focus and talk about the death rate of Black women in breast cancer? Is that something you two can foresee?
So for me personally, I look at it like this. We've asked in 2020 some of our white allies to come out and speak on behalf of African Americans. We've asked that when they come out and they speak, and maybe it might, I don't know whether it means more or whatever, but people listen and it resonates with individuals. And it's the same with women. It's the same with African American women. And I use the example of a number of NBA players writing Breonna Taylor's name on their shoes. I look at just the amount of times that an NBA player will pick up the causes and what we've been so passionate and diligent about fighting in the communities for. And all of a sudden now it's relevant and it's getting attention, things like that. And so, yes, I do believe that if our professional leagues were to focus on, African-American health, African-American women's health, especially, then yes, it would benefit us tremendously.
That's right. Curtis?
And it could be difficult, especially on our side on Major League Baseball. Again, our numbers are just so low in terms of the representation. And like you mentioned, we do all the great things from wearing the pink cleats and the pink wristbands and doing all that stuff for that weekend or for that day, which is great. But we know it's more than just one day and more than just one weekend. For example, the last month of the Major League Baseball season is Hispanic Heritage Month, and rightfully so. Our players comprised of a number of players from very Spanish-speaking countries across the world, which is great. But we have one day, Jackie Robinson Day, that is for Black players in this game. So we run into some challenges there when we start talking about, okay, can we do something specifically for Black health and, of course, Black women's health in a sport where we are so low? Now, at the same time, there are some ways, like you said, Candace, where we can step up and start to push the envelope forward and start to demand certain things. And one thing that I would highly recommend that doesn't necessarily have to be a movement is, again, just the communication. I feel like, especially in the Black community, for some reason, we're ashamed to talk about our health. So as a woman, people listen. And my sister just was recently diagnosed with colon cancer. And because of that, me being 11 years younger than her, now I know that I need to get a colonoscopy. If I would have waited, I would have been getting my colonoscopy when I turned 50, which is the average age to do it. But now that we've started this dialogue, I can start going ahead and possibly doing some preventative measures. And there's certain things that are, breast cancer is a very difficult one. I lost my grandmother to breast cancer, but there are certain challenges, especially for Black women, because the health numbers and things are so stacked against us, that if we start to talk about some of the health, especially the hereditary health, some of the history in our family, we can hopefully start to turn this thing around. And as a sports team and league and just athletes, encouraging people to speak up. And again, we will listen. I'll continue to bring that message home again. We'll listen and go, wow, that happened. Okay, now I can do this and put these measures in place for me.
Again, we're sorry for your loss, but I'm so encouraged by how proactive you're turning that moment into. Well, Kenya, I want to ask you this. If Biden-Harris pull this thing off and they are victorious on election night, what do you think their first priority will be as it relates to healthcare in this country, Black women's healthcare, and this COVID response, which we know has disproportionately affected folks that look like us?
Thank you again, Ebony. And you know what I'll say? I know everyone keeps saying if, but I'm going to say I'm praying for the win. Okay?
Oh, I'm praying for the win now.
I'm calling it for the win and the win in this election. We just can't afford not to win. I think you'll see active changes in the first 100 days, specifically around healthcare. We have so much repair to do from this previous administration. I think the thing that keeps people safest will be the first and utmost priority for this administration. I think when you have in just 1 year's time, more than 200,000 people who have lost their lives to COVID in the United States of America, almost 2 million of us who have been infected with the disease. I think you can't help. You know, my grandmother's had COVID twice. I have another good friend who's had COVID, who's a medical doctor. I have, friends who literally lost loved ones. I mean, numbers of their family members to this pandemic, and it's just so much uncertainty that still lies ahead for this pandemic. And as we enter into a new phase, into the winter, as we enter into a new year and still facing so many unknowns as it relates to this disease. And that's what I'll call it, because that's what it's a plague. And it is plaguing our country, it's plaguing our nation. I think you will see that healthcare is a part of the 100-day action plan from the Biden-Harris campaign.
Fantastic. Now, Tamika mentioned it, talking about voting beyond just the presidency, right? This election has to be beyond just the top of the ticket. It's got to be about, for me, as important as the presidency are who we put in this United States Senate. If people haven't gotten anything from this Amy Coney Barrett shoved down our throat, quick ass confirmation, this Mitch McConnell Senate, y'all, it ain't it.
It's not it.
It ain't it. Okay.
It's not it.
So Yodeet, I want you to speak to the importance of voting down ballot, including district attorneys' offices, local judges, and all of that. How important is that?
So I was just about to mention that the presidential election, of course, gets the most media coverage. It's the most popular, but the issues that affect and complicate Black lives the most are at the local level. And, local elections are the most ignored and they happen the most frequently. So it's so incredibly important for people to get involved in that, because local elections means voting for a mayor who then appoints a police chief. The police chief evaluates standards and cultures in their department. You have city council members, which means, how much funding is going to be allocated to your community. Then you have district attorneys who then, may hold police accountable, who may implement policies to decrease incarceration, to get rid of cash bail. So these are incredibly important issues that touch our lives on a day-to-day. And so I would say that it's incredibly important for people to get involved locally. And not only that, go beyond that a little bit, try and find an issue that hurts our community that you want to address and find out who's responsible for addressing those issues. And if they have solutions, and if they don't have solutions, consider running for the position yourself. And if not, find somebody that will support them. And that's how you get involved.
Indeed. And I want to just be specific here. Sister Wakenya is making some extremely important points. I want to let you highlight some of these specific Senate races and Black Senate candidates we need to be talking about. I know I had a fantastic interview. It's actually airing in just 1 hour on Revolt Black News with Brother Jamie Harrison, who was in a very hot, tight race. May he prevail over that Lindsey Graham, because Lindsey Graham ain't it. But please share some other Black Senate candidates that are running in important races. Wakenya.
Yeah, and I may be taking some personal privilege here, but these are some of my really great friends, and so I want to make sure.
Please do. We love Black privilege here at the Black Women's Health Imperative. Go off, sis.
I want to make sure that folks are aware of what's really at stake. And I'm going to start with Georgia, because you have Reverend Raphael Warnock, who is in a highly contentious Senate race there in Georgia, and he's actually in the lead. But because it is a jungle primary, there is a likeliness of a runoff in that race unless he can flat out win that spot. And so for all the folks who are standing in line in Georgia, please just stay there. Stay there until you vote, because it's just that important. And the other reason that his race is specifically important is because he would take office immediately, meaning he would take office just in time enough For the Senate, vote again on the ACA. He and Mark Kelly of Arizona. So if you're in Georgia or Arizona, your votes are more critical now than they probably will be in the next 20 years. So that's one. Two, I cannot let this conversation go by without acknowledging my own home state of Mississippi, where we have a good friend of mine, Mike Espy, on the ballot, who is an inch away from victory in that state. Mississippi is about 40% African American.
Yeah.
We have probably the largest African American population per capita than any other state in the nation, but yet we still are the poorest. We are still the one that has the highest healthcare disparities, as well as educational gaps in that country, in that state. And so what that means is that we need Mike Espy in the Senate, because healthcare is really on the ballot for us. Majority of our state receive Medicare and Medicaid services. And, you know, for those who don't know, our state did not expand Medicare. And so this is a vital vote. This is a vote for life or death in the state of Mississippi. And of course, you have Jamie Harrison in South Carolina, and a sister who is on the ballot in Tennessee, Marquita Bradshaw. She's not getting much attention, but her race is still just as important as the other three that I've mentioned. And if we're going to lean in, we need to lean all the way in and making sure that we are turning out for those Senate seats, as well as in the state of North Carolina, where you have 3 of the 4 top spots for statewide being contended by Black women. So from lieutenant governor to labor commissioner, I think it's one other commissioner, I can't remember. And then you have a number of key congressional races in that state as well. Ebony mentioned earlier that North Carolina decides the Electoral College. That's plain blank simple. It's going to boil down to North Carolina. And so we need to be running up voter participation in the state of North Carolina, specifically in those races where you see those Black women on the ballot. So if you're going to vote in this election, I'm just going to say it, just vote Black. Just vote Black this election cycle, and let's just do the thing.
Let's just, I don't know what much more needs to be said, but I will offer this observation as a proud daughter also, Wakenya, of the South. Look at how incredible this list is. We know that Tim Scott is the only Black person to be elected to the United States Senate since Reconstruction from the South.
From the South.
And from the South. How incredible is it that of these Black Senate candidates, almost all of them are from the South? I personally just think that's remarkable.
And I really think the only 2 states in the South that had Black senators post Reconstruction. So Mississippi and South Carolina.
There we go. So I just think this is I don't think God makes mistakes. I just think this is all ordained and divine and very, very important. Before we wrap up, I want to get to Candace and Curtis and ask you as athletes. And, you know, Colin Kaepernick, for our generation, I don't think it's an overstatement to say in many ways, he's our Ali. You know, we know athletes and activism have long gone hand in hand. How do both of you as athletes see yourselves and your activism, because you are both activists, carrying on the legacy of the late, great John Lewis? How can you speak to that? I'll start with you, Candace.
You know, I was extremely inspired. I watched, obviously, the documentary, and I think everybody's, at least in my household, understood, you know, how much John Lewis dedicated his life to what we're still continuing to fight for. And I think as athletes, there was a turning point when we were told to shut up and dribble. Realize, like, that's what we can't do. If that's what they're telling us to do, and they're telling us to concentrate. And then, you know, I love having in-depth conversations with friends and teammates over dinner. And it came to the point where, like, athletes really are the only profession that are told to just kind of stay in their lane. Like, you're not telling doctors to get political.
Sure not.
You're not telling lawyers to stay in your lane and not get political. Like, athletes were the only ones that were really told to shut up and dribble. And so because of that, I think all of us were like, no, we are citizens of this country. We're going to use our platform, and we're really going to try to continue the things that John Lewis has done to really make this better. And honestly, it is about our kids. It is about my daughter understanding how important it is to see her parents vote and to see, you know, just the things, how to be a good citizen in this country.
Excellent.
And when you see,
Curtis?
and along those lines, when you see how fans respond when their teams win a championship and they cry and they call their family members up, you see how impactful sports are. So whether an athlete chooses to or not to, they are an activist and a role model without even having to try to do so. People are looking to us and influenced by us in so many different ways. Well, Kenya, talking about Mississippi, you know this, and it's not 100% the only reason why it happened, but when the college conferences said they would not play basketball or hold tournaments in the state of Mississippi, soon after, they said, we're going to get rid of the Confederate flag in our state flag. Now, I know a lot of people advocated for that, but when they said sports aren't coming, we know how sports are in the South and throughout this country. Sports are big in so many different ways. So even though they do tell us to shut up and dribble and be quiet and you should just be happy that you're getting paid, so many people are looking at us and paying attention to us. If we go out there and put a mask on, people go, I'm gonna wear a mask. You know, we go out there and flip the sticker on and says, I voted, I'm gonna go vote. People follow us in so many different ways. So even though they try to stop us and try to say that you can't do this, there are so many people that look up to us and do so many things because of what we do and what we say, and understand as an athlete that our voice is very powerful.
Beautiful, beautiful. And what better example did we see this year, right? In the Queen, Naomi Osaka, with all of her different mask and messaging points. And my favorite thing I saw probably during the quarantine was when some reporter asked, Naomi, what message were you trying to get across with your different masks that said, you know, Ahmaud Arbery or Breonna Taylor? She said, I don't know. What message did you take? What message did you take? And I think that says it all. Listen, Candace, Curtis, Kenya, Yodit, I want to thank you all for your esteemed insight, your expertise, and your transparency here tonight. I want to thank the Black Women's Health Imperative. Of course, I want to thank Linda Goler Blount, and I want to thank all of our audience for giving us your time and your hearts. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.